have taken tough decisions.
Tough choices now.
Tough choices won't just stop there.
They may not stop, but they may be diluted in the face of vast opposition.
I now call the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer.
Addressing Parliament about defence this morning, the Prime Minister had to start with a message to his own army of rebels.
On social security, I recognise there is a consensus across the House on the urgent need for reform of our welfare system. All colleagues want to get this right, and so do I. We want to see reform implemented with Labour values of fairness. That conversation will continue in the coming days so we can begin making change together on Tuesday.
Campaigners have taken to the streets. Now more than 120 of Labour's own MPs have taken to an amendment that would block the government's flagship welfare reform bill. It would also block the £5 billion saving, much of it coming from plans to tighten eligibility requirements for personal independence payments. With every new day, a new rebel. Why now?
I was looking to see signs that the government might be about to change track or delay the legislation, just make sure we got it right. It didn't seem to be happening, so, you know, I did have my name to the amendment.
Today, the Prime Minister said, well, his language has been a bit more amenable. It sounds like there might be something coming. If he'd made the same noises yesterday, would you have put your name to the amendment?
I think probably not. I think, you know, I was looking for some encouragement, and that didn't come.
This isn't a tribal issue Sir Keir Starmer can pin on the left. The Labour signatories on this amendment, more than 120 of them, span all wings of the party. More concerningly for the Prime Minister, more than half of the rebels are new MPs selected under his watch. Anna Dixon is one of them. Ultimately, it's still going to mean a massive cut to the budget, the amount of money that's paid out in PIPs. Are you ever going to find that palatable?
I think the problem is if you start with money, you come to the wrong answer. I think what we're asking is pause these changes, engage with disabled people and bring forward a proper review of PIP where we can see what the impact of those changes will be.
The extraordinary thing is this is an argument over an increase in spending on disability and sickness benefits. At the end of the Parliament, even with these changes, there's going to be 750,000 more people receiving benefits of this kind and spending that increases by £8 billion.
So your colleagues, the 120 that have signed this amendment, is this just a massive act of Labour self-harm?
And I hope that they come to their senses before Tuesday, because I do think it would be very, very damaging for the government.
Anger has spread from policy to the man many see as being behind a lot of it, Morgan McSweeney, the Prime Minister's long-standing aide and Chief of Staff. Some now questioning his position. Is Morgan McSweeney's post safe?
Honestly, I'm much less interested in gossip in SW1 than getting this legislation right.
Backbenchers aren't saying this is gossip, though. They are looking at how the government goes about doing its business. Winter fuel payments was bad policy. They say you got a U-turn. They're saying that what is being proposed at the moment is bad policy. There's only so many times you can do bad policy after bad policy, and sometimes you've got to think, why are we making this bad policy?
So we inherited a mess. The fact is, we had a flatlining economy, poor public services, and a fiscally impaired balance sheet. We're 1 year into a 5-year Parliament. This is not a sprint over the first year, it's a marathon over 5 years.
Next week will mark 1 year since Sir Keir Starmer first entered Downing Street. The party's anniversary gift to him, forcing major concessions on one of his major policies.
We've had a white smoke moment on those concessions in the last few moments. We don't know the details, but I understand from someone involved in the discussions, they've been offered, quote, substantial changes on the support to disabled people receiving disability benefits. Downing Street still think that there will be rebels, perhaps about 50, because on top of those 120 that signed the amendment, I understand that there are 24 more who are willing to do the same, and 2 parliamentary private secretaries who are willing to resign over this. Now that's unlikely to happen now, but with those substantial changes to this bill will come substantial costs and substantial scepticism now whenever the Prime Minister and his Chancellor say, we've made our decision, we won't budge. Evidently, they do.
Paul McNamara in Westminster.
Well, with me here, our social affairs editor, Jackie Long, and our economics reporter, Neil MacDonald. Jackie, first
Well,
of all.
for me, this story has echoes of the last time major reform of the welfare system was being attempted back in 2010 under the coalition government. Now, a very different government, fair to say. Not many had direct or lived experience of the benefit system, and they came up with universal credit. Now, at the beginning, this was a benefit that had a built-in 6-week delay before you got paid. Now, it occurred to me at the time, that clearly no one in those discussions in the room put their hand up and said, do you know what? Poorer people do not have 6 weeks' worth of money languishing in the bank. This is never going to work. It caused devastating hardship. People went into debt. People weren't able to pay their rent. The use of food banks went up enormously. And in the end, the government had to change it. It was a fatal policy flaw, which many people argued could have been avoided if there'd been a better understanding of what it's like to live on the margins. Now, fast forward to today, you have a very different cabinet. You have people with direct experience of relying on benefits. The Deputy Prime Minister, the Education Secretary, have both spoken at times very movingly about what it's like to live in poverty. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, said work for his mother was low paid and inconsistent, and when there was none, we relied on benefits to put food in the fridge. Yet their original reform plans would have meant 250,000 people pushed into poverty, 50,000 of them children. There are many in their own party, let alone their core vote, who find it inexplicable that the Labour government have ended up at this point, but entirely inevitable that they're going to have to change tack.
So that's the substance on benefits. But, Neil, the government's also received news today, gloomy news on our standard of living.
Yeah, so just as Labour has been arguing furiously about the impact of these benefit cuts on the living standards of disabled people, today we heard some pretty grim predictions about living standards for everyone over this Parliament, with the think tank, the Resolution Foundation, saying those incomes are set to basically stagnate. So I can show you, they forecast that the typical annual real income of non-pensioners is set to increase by just 1% by the end of this Parliament. And just to be clear, that's not 1% a year, that's 1% over 5 years. If you look at the bottom half of the income distribution, it's down 1%. You go down to the bottom fifth of the population, it's worse, down by 4% after inflation.
Those are terrible figures for a Labour government.
Yes, living standards used to go up on average by 1 or 2% every year. The problem, says the Resolution Foundation, there's plenty, weak jobs growth, weak wage growth, rents going up, mortgages up, taxes up, council tax up, benefits also under review. Now, of course, we've just been through COVID, we've been through a cost of living crisis. If you take that together with those 5 years of predictions, then what you end up with is a typical income in 2030 being at the same level as it was in 2019. So no real gain for a decade. That would make it the worst decade for living standards that anyone working in Britain today has ever experienced.
Neil MacDonald. Well, joining me from Westminster now is Tom Baldwin. He's a former Labour communications chief and has also written a biography of Sir Keir Starmer. Thanks for joining us. What do you think is worse for Keir Starmer, that he got it wrong on benefits reform, or that he's lost control of a majority of over 150?
I think what's happened is a policy which I don't think they ever really intended to be presented this way has become just this big round number about a cut. And what they're trying to get back to is this sense of this is actually about slowing the growth of spending on disability. So, I think what you'll see over the next few days is them making concessions along those lines. I think you could do more about protecting existing claimants, because if you're slowing the growth in spending, that's not really about existing claimants, it's about new claimants. So, what's happened, I think, is you've got politics working almost as it should. Because Labour MPs are not just sort of message amplifiers, as one was told rather poorly, I think, by someone at the heart of power once. They're actually there to represent their constituents and represent Labour values. And they've listened to people. They've heard what people are saying about this. They've gone back to the government and said, you've got to listen to this. And I think it's really good. I think it's a sign of strength that Keir Starmer's now listening.
That's parliamentary politics maybe working as it should, but not how the government is supposed to work. It's supposed to get things right. And this also drives a coach and horses through Rachel Reeves's spending plans, doesn't it? Her fiscal headroom could be wiped out by whatever concessions she now has to give, and that means she'll either have to make further cuts or increase taxes.
Well, I don't know the exact nature of the concessions that they're making and what that means. I think governments don't get things right all the time. Governments make mistakes. This government has made mistakes. Keir Starmer knows he's made mistakes. What's important is how you respond to mistakes. Do you listen? Do you learn? Do you make the same mistakes again? I think what you're seeing now is Keir Starmer, he's always been a very iterative personality. He's not someone with this big vision or ideology.
Yeah.
He's trying to find something that works, and if something doesn't work, he'll try something else.
But he's caused months of worry, hasn't he, for disabled people along the way. He's caused an awful lot of anxiety for the people affected by these cuts. And people are very angry with his chief advisor, aren't they? I mean, if you read your old newspaper, The Times, there's been a lot of briefing against Morgan McSweeney, the chief of staff, as if it's all his fault.
Yeah, I think over the last few months you've had the sort of impression, partly because this is what's been written, that that everything's about Morgan McSweeney, that he's the genius who's running everything. He's always served at the pleasure of Keir Starmer. And I think what you've seen, actually, I think since the Runcorn by-election, is Keir Starmer actually asserting his personality and his values more on his government. I think the personality you've seen on the global stage, this calm, pragmatic, grown-up figure, I think you're going to see that more on the domestic stage over the next few months. I think he's cracking down on some of this anonymous briefing. He's cracking down on this sort of sense that, they're chasing after reform. I don't think that's ever really been.
But will he own the mistake?
There has been mistakes, and I think what's important is when you make a mistake, is you recognise it, you own it, and you show you've learnt from that. That's how Keir Starmer's always operated in law and in politics, and I think it's a good sign that he's listening now, rather than some sort of fetishising conflict and pain and confrontation. I don't think that's who he is, and so it's good that he's on the phone tonight talking to MPs. It's good that he's listening to people, because that is the Keir Starmer that I wrote a book about.
Tom Baldwin, thank you very much.
Thank you.